So yesterday we spent the better part of the day dealing with the TMPD1 tender, and a familiar refrain of yours through that, or through the entire day, was that it was not possible for documents to be manipulated or the process to be manipulated because documents were kept under lock and key throughout the process.
Yes.
You recall? Now, over this period, were you aware that there were problems with the control of documents relating to tenders in respect of the TMPD?
There were no problems in terms of documents being safeguarded.
Well, I think that answer's wrong. Let me take you to page 429 of file 2. These are the minutes of the BAC, not in relation to TMPD1, but in relation to TMPD3.
Sorry, SC, I think I lost you. 429 of the second bundle.
The second bundle, indeed.
My annexures.
Sorry, your annexures,
Okay.
yes. So it's file 2, page 429, it's your annexures.
Yes.
Now, this is a minute of a bid adjudication committee that you chaired in relation to TMPD3
Yes.
on 23 October 2025. And that committee noted that there were 6 documents lost during the relocation of documents to another storage. Therefore, measures and controls to safeguard documents should be implemented. You see that?
Yes, Chair, these were one of the reasons why this tender had to be cancelled. Irregularities were noted. I see that.
We'll get back to this tender later. This was not one of the reasons why the tender was cancelled, or not one of the stated reasons why the tenders were cancelled. What the committee stated was that measures and controls to safeguard documents should be implemented. You see that?
Yes, I see that, Council. Permission to explain. In relation to the process and the presentation from the BEC, these irregularities were picked up in this instance. Hence, they needed to be, I think, enhanced in the near future when they're handling this tender.
So the BEC had been unable to control its documents over the period of TMPD3.
As evident in the probity report and the presentation, those were one of the flaws that were picked up.
Again, we'll come back to see whether it's evident from the probity report. I don't want to deal with TMPD now. I want to deal with the proposition that everything was kept under lock and key so we can be confident that there was no tampering with the process. And what I want to put to you is that if over the same period documents got lost in relation to TMPD3, there is no guarantee that over the same period documents couldn't have been replaced in respect of TMPD1. What's your answer to that?
My answer is that I don't agree with you.
Why is that?
Documents are kept under lock and key. The ability of any committee to pick up any mishap from transferring a set of documents to another is an internal control that's been put in place specifically for that. In terms of transfer of documents, they happen in 3 ways. Tenders are received, they are stored under lock and key at demand management section. From that point in time, evaluation commences. Same documents are handed over to the bid evaluation committee, still stored under lock and key. Once the probity process starts, similar transfer happens, an individual signs off for it, they are responsible for who can access that particular storage facility, and when they're transferred back again, a similar exercise is done. So in this instance that you are referring to, The BEC came to BAC, presented probity report. Over and above that, they indicated that during the transfer back, either from probity back to BEC, they noted that there were 6 documents that were outstanding. So I disagree with the notion, SC, that documents are never under lock and key.
I didn't say the documents weren't never under lock and key. My proposition was that if 6 documents could be lost during a relocation process in respect of TMPD3, there's no reason to believe that documents couldn't have been replaced in some part of the process of TMPD1.
I respectfully disagree with that again, SC. Reason being, you're referring to documents lost at this stage. So linking documents lost and replacing of documents is a completely different thing from my perspective.
Why is it different? If documents can be lost, why can't documents be slipped into the files?
They're under lock and safe. The individuals who sign off for them as part of the segregation of duties. They accept and they make a vow to ensure that they will safeguard these documents and they will ensure that there's nothing that occurs in the form of tampering. So we rely on the delegated powers that we send to various officials as well.
Yes, but in this case, despite that vow and despite the protocol of lock and key, 6 documents disappeared.
Indeed, and this was a positive thing that we were able to pick this up because it showed that the internal control processes were in place and they're working adequately. We were then able to hold the process accountable. Between probity and BEC upon transfer, we're able to hold an individual accountable for documents that have been lost.
And who was held accountable here?
I don't recall.
Was anybody held accountable?
So at this stage, we make recommendations and we send them through to the accounting officer. At this point in time, I don't recall.
The recommendation isn't that anyone should be held accountable. The recommendation is that measures and controls to safeguard documents should be implemented.
That's true. We are BEC, and as a BEC, we have to make recommendations that will enhance the procurement processes, SC.
And what that recommendation presupposes is that the proper measures and controls to safeguard documents had not been implemented in the time leading up to 23 October 2025.
Yes, SC, I agree with that, but I would like to make an explanation that documents were lost or could not be found between probity and BEC after the process was done.
Sorry, after?
Yes, it was between the transfer process where the probity report was available. And this is the
So it was after probity had made its report. All of the documents were given to probity, but they disappeared between probity and BEC on the way back from probity. Is that what you're saying?
That's the report I received.
Well, let's look at the probity report. Because one of the things that probity says is, if you go to page 419, at page 54.9, paragraph 54.9, no score sheets were received for BEC member Mr. Tsukudu Malachi. We could not confirm whether he scored from previous meetings. The absence of scoring from one member undermines the integrity of the evaluation process and compromises fairness and consistency in the adjudication of bids. So what they are suggesting there is that Mr. Malachi, who purported to be present on the day, had no score sheet in the documents. Was that one of the documents that was lost?
Okay. With your permission, Chair, this is true. Yes, I agree with you. The score sheets were not there as part of the pack that probity was conducting oversight on. However, I need to qualify the statement of documents that were lost. When they say documents, they're not referring to individual components of documents. It was actual tender documents of bidders. So in this instance, for argument's sake, because from the top of my head, I'm aware of 57 bidders from TMPD1, what was brought back was 51 bidders without 6 documents. So the resolution in the BAC SC does not refer to individual documentations, it refers to actual tender documents for bidders. Hence, BAC raised that as an additional measure, as an additional instance which was not picked up or identified in the probity report. We had to isolate that as an additional mechanism or as additional shortfall that was identified.
So you're now saying that entire bid documents disappeared?
That's what I've been saying from the beginning. I probably think there might have been a misunderstanding. The 6 documents were 6 bidders' documents that couldn't be tracked back between handover from probity to BEC or vice versa.
And are the score sheets supposed to be kept under lock and key?
Score sheets are within the same room under lock and key. They should be.
So if a score sheet can disappear under lock and key, why can't something else disappear under lock and key?
You see, this is where now members of BEC must be accountable for safeguarding certain documents. And these were the major shortcomings that were picked up at this point in time.
Yeah, you see, I agree with you. There were major shortcomings. My problem is that when we talk about TMPD1, you want us to approach the issue as though there were no shortcomings at all in relation to the document control process under the BEC.
SC, with your permission, I could equally refer you back to the probity report of TMPD1. And the probity report of TMPD1 did not identify any shortcomings of that nature. That then, of course, gives me assurance that for TMPD1, there were no shortcomings, documents were validated to be under lock and key, and there were no instances of irregularities that were picked up. Upon evaluation on TMPD3, however, the same exercise is repeated. There must be a test to ensure that documents were still under lock and key and they were safeguarded. For this instance, that test failed, which was then, as a result, which was then one of the key factors that led to disqualification.
Well, how would probity ever pick up if there had been a tampering of the process, not in respect of documents disappearing, but in respect of documents being changed before they went to probity?
There's no suggestion that documents were tampered.
Well, that's not my question. How would probity pick up if that had taken place?
So as far as I'm concerned, probity they utilize a number of systems when they do their work. Within that, they evaluate documents as well. Within that, they could probably have systems to see whether there's been an amendment or a tamper of a document that was there.
Now, you see, if one looks at what Sergeant Nkosi was doing and wanted, we've seen in TMPD1, he wanted the award of the tender. So he didn't want to leave traces behind that would lead to the cancellation of the tender. You accept that?
No, I can't accept that.
He wanted the award of the tender to Nkapashe and El Shaddai.
I can't accept the component of saying he didn't want to leave traces.
Well, if you wanted the award of the tender to 2 bidders, and you left traces of tampering, like the removal of documents, you would expose yourself to the risk that the tender got cancelled, and then there wouldn't be an award. You accept that?
I accept that, but in this instance, through the assurance exercise, there was no tampering of documents that was identified.
No, Mr. Mnisi, you can't say there was no tampering. You've already conceded the document control measures by this BEC were faulty over the period.
Mr. Chairperson, I'm going to object to the proposal put by my learned friend. If it's my learned friend's case that there was indeed tampering, then he should deal with it in that regard. He's currently speculating and putting speculations to the witness. And that's not my understanding of what the Commission's work is. The Commission's work is not to speculate when you put proposals to witnesses. You can only put a suggestion or put a version or put a proposal to a witness if it's based on an actual fact or an inference that's drawn from facts. Here cannot be an issue of inferences being drawn from facts, because that happens right at the end. When the Commission sits and takes all the evidence, it's the only time they can draw an inference from the facts. So I would, with respect, say my learned friend, needs to either rephrase his question or withdraw it or deal with it. If it's his case that there was tampering, then put to the witness there was tampering. We've got evidence there was tampering, but not in the manner that is currently going on. May I please?
Thank you, Ms. Van Heever. I will let Mr. Shaskalson respond, but I must say right away I do not have a problem with the question, because with cross-examination sometimes you do not want to be direct. You want to lay a background before you come to the point that you really want to make, but I'll let Mr. Shaskalson respond.
Chair, I'm simply testing the proposition that the witness, the refrain of the witness from yesterday, that none of this could happen because everything was under lock and key. There could be no tampering because everything was under lock and key.
I actually counted from when he testified last week up to yesterday. He said there's no less than 4 times. Yes, please continue, Mr. Shaskalson.
So my simple proposition to you, Mr. Mnisi, is that you cannot offer this commission any assurance that everything was kept under lock and key, and thus we can assume the document control was perfect.
I can assure you, we need to look at these particular tenders in isolation of each other. It's not the same members, first of all, that sit in TMPD1 versus TMPD2. So it's incorrect to make an inference from shortcomings that were identified as a result of internal controls that we've had put in place, and align those shortcomings to TMPD1, where the test of time was passed. The test of document arrangements, safeguarding and safekeeping was conducted at TMPD1. It passed the test of time. Probity report has been attached. TMPD3, a separate set of individuals conducting the same work. When assurance exercise is being conducted, the test of safeguarding is failed. So I would respectfully disagree with you when you link shortcomings of TMPD3 to shortcomings of TMPD1, particularly when we're testing the notion of documents being safeguarded under lock and key. That test was passed, and we've got sufficient evidence to prove that.
Well, I'll leave it here. I've put the proposition. I'll leave the commissioners to reach whatever conclusions they want to reach. I want now to go to TMPD3 because there is a fundamental difference between TMPD3 and TMPD1 in relation to Sergeant Nkosi. And the fundamental difference is that in TMPD1, Sergeant Nkosi wanted the award of the tender to Ngapashia and El Shaddai. And in TMPD3, he wanted the cancellation of the award. Let's look at the chronology. And the easiest place to see the chronology of TMPD3 is the probity report on TMPD, which is GM20. It's at page 403, where it starts. And it deals with the chronology from page 416. So I just want to get clarity first on the chronology, and if you have difficulties with any of the stages in the chronology that I'm going to put to you, indicate them. Paragraph 46, the bid was advertised on the 12th of December 2024 with a closing date of 21 February. You confirm that was correct?
What page are you on, SC?
416.
12th of December, 21st of February, yes.
The bid expiry date at the foot of the page, 47.3, was 21 May.
I agree.
We go down to 418. We see that the BEC met on numerous days, starting on the 24th of March and ending on the 7th of May. Can you confirm that's correct?
I confirm that as per page 417.
Well, ending on the 7th of May is incorrect because there was a meeting of 28 May where the recommendation was made. 54.5. Signed minutes for 28th May where the committee was recommending tender. You see that?
I see that on page 418.
Now, if we go all the way down to 426, we see that probity has identified certain potential problems, and it recommends in paragraph 71 that the BEC considers our observations with the intention of curing them before submitting the report to BAC, and BAC satisfies itself that the observed defects have been sufficiently cured when the BEC report is tabled. So the position of probity was that nothing that it had identified was irreparable.
I disagree with you, SC.
What would the purpose of indicating that there should be a process to cure these deficiencies, to attempt to cure these deficiencies, be if the probity people had already identified them as being irreparable?
Perfect. SC, firstly, 406 gives a detailed summary of the findings that were identified by a probity report. In terms of those findings, the recommendation is cure matters that are curable. There are instances where matters can't be cured. For argument's sake, BEC score sheets, I'm on page 406, Commissioners. It states, BEC score sheets are dated 29th of May. However, there are no minutes to support the assumption that there was a BEC meeting on the 29th of May. This is not curable. The only way to cure a finding of this nature is to recreate minutes and then attach them. So, which wasn't a plausible mechanism of regularizing a tender with shortcomings. Just raising this as one of the obvious matters which are uncurable. The second one I want to bring...
Can I take you up there? What if it turns out, as it seems to be, that there were in fact minutes, their minutes were just incorrectly dated 28th May, because the minutes of 28th May reflect the recommendation. And unless there was an out-and-out fraud in this case, and a very clumsy fraud, it is not possible for the recommendation to have been made before the score sheets, the scoring process had taken place.
As in normal instances, probity reporting team as well as the BEC meet before the reports are finalized. Findings are put towards them. When findings are put towards them, the BEC has got the opportunity to provide the relevant supporting evidence if they are disputing a particular finding from probity. I'll give you an example. We had a discussion on TMPD1 on the probity report, where the probity team came on board and clearly indicated there are two instances where we are disqualifying this bidder of Mtsira Security Services as a result of the audited financial statements not being there and as a result of the 5-ton truck not being there. Probity team provided the relevant evidence to, the BEC team provided the necessary evidence to the probity team, convinced them accordingly, an amended confirmation letter was provided. In this instance, the BEC could not prove beyond reasonable doubt to probity that the minutes were there, which gives us surety as BAC that these findings are accepted, both 1 and 2, with the minutes for the one scoring member which were not there. They failed to justify to the probity team on the availability of those documentation.
So you are saying that it was then established that the BEC had made a recommendation on the 28th before the scoring took place on the 29th. Is that what you're saying?
No, Chair. What I'm saying is there's a missing element in terms of our protocols, and our protocols are there must be minutes that clearly detail what happened in the previous meeting as part of the compliance process. Within the process that was there was a major deficiency in terms of minutes not being available, which are a key part and parcel of the process in order to ensure that a tender is legitimate. That was not there in this case, and respectfully, that's what I'm saying. And it couldn't be proved, apologies SC, it couldn't be proved to the probity team when the internal arrangements and debates were occurring between the BEC and the BAC. When they came to the BEC and the probity team, when the teams came to BAC, they confirmed that the minutes were not there.
Well, that doesn't appear in the BAC report, but let's take the implications of what you're saying. What you're saying is that there were no minutes of 29 May.
Yes, yeah, I'm not saying that the probity report is saying that.
Okay, what you're saying is that the BAC accepted that there was no evidence of minutes of 29 May.
I'm accepting that, Chair.
Yes. The BAC also accepted that that 29 May was when the scoring took place. The score sheets are dated 29 May.
We accepted that.
The BAC also accepted that in a document purporting to be minutes of 28 May, a recommendation was made for this tender.
Please repeat that.
On a document purporting to be minutes of 28 May, a recommendation was made for this tender, because that was the problem picked up by probity.
Yes, we accepted that.
So what the BAC accepted was that on 28 May, a recommendation was made. You accept that?
I think I accept.
Yes or no? Yes. Yes or no?
I see the probity report indicates that. From a BAC perspective, I just want to add, you mentioned earlier on that in the BAC report, we did not mention that. So what we do, we don't regurgitate all findings as is. We add matters that were not there. So we wouldn't have seen that isolated in the BAC report, SC, with all due respect. Taking into account the presentation that were brought to us, point number 5 indicates that the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of May lists 4 members, with Mr. Enos Ramanana's name appearing twice. We accepted that with the flaw that came with that.
Can I ask you to confine yourself to answering my questions? My question was that the BAC accepted, do you confirm that the BAC accepted that a document purporting to be minutes of 28 May 2025 recorded a recommendation for the tender?
SC, I accept that.
And the BAC also accepted that the scoring or the score sheets were dated 29 May.
Accept that.
Now, how can you recommend a tender on the 28th May if you only score on the 29th of May?
Those are exactly the irregularities that were picked up. This is an anomaly. It can't be like that.
Now, if you accept that anomaly, will you not also have to accept that what happened on the 28th of May was a deliberate fraud because no scoring had taken place?
Chairperson, at a BAC, our restrictions and functions are restricted. In terms of these functions being restricted, we need to ensure that procurement processes have been followed and the necessary oversight from a BAC perspective. Once those cancellations have been made, first, we would have expected that either to be made by the probate assurance team or when the accounting officer is assessing that to make further recommendations. From a BAC perspective, our functions are clear. We can't overstep those functions. We can't make recommendations that are outside our powers. And I want to just give a quick example to support that. There are instances where departments would come to BAC asking for budget adjustments. We clearly say to them, that's outside our mandate. We can't make a resolution of that nature. Go to the accounting officer. Similarly with that, we had to confine ourselves to the roles and responsibilities that have been assigned to the BAC. And those were ensure that you assess and the BAC, the procurement process is followed to the T. In this instance, probity says cure these findings. We had to go back and assess each of these. And if these were curable, what BAC would have done, SC, is refer the matter back to the BEC and say, BEC, these are the 7 issues that you need to cure. These are curable. It will not have an adverse effect on the regularity of the process. In this instance, there were matters and findings that were uncurable without committing fraud. And that fraud will be backdating minutes and recomputing score sheets that were not there. Hence, this tender was uncurable.
Mr. Mnisi, if the recommendation was made on 28th May and the scoring was done on 29th May, you have a series of members of the BEC who are participating in a fraud. Is that not right?
I can't comment on that.
No, you can comment on it. If they made their recommendation on the 28th and only did the scoring on the 29th, the scoring was a complete sham, was it not?
I would be making an assumption because I wouldn't have known what would have happened in that instance. I can't answer that question, SC. if
Is it-
individuals are committing fraud? It's a very difficult question for me to answer without having any corroborative evidence for me to rely on.
Well, in this case, you are saying that you assumed that the recommendation, or you accepted that the recommendation was made in a meeting on the 28th. And the scoring took place on score sheets dated the 29th. You've accepted that?
The BAC accepted that.
No, I'm not. The BAC, including yourself, you chaired that meeting. Yes, you accepted that.
So we made a collective decision. We accepted it.
Yes. So you accepted that scoring took place on the 29th, although the recommendation had already been made the previous day. Now, how can you make a recommendation?
Don't nod, Mr. Mnisi, please.
Sorry, Commissioner.
I understand the nod to be a yes.
Oh, apologies. I'm trying to concentrate, Commissioner. Apologies.
Yeah. No need to apologize. Thank you.
So you accepted that a recommendation was made on the 28th. And then the next day, the people who had made the recommendation purported to score the bids that they, in respect of a tender where they'd already made a recommendation.
We accept that, and it's an anomaly.
Now, let's assume that those facts are correct, because you've accepted them. Are we not looking at a fraud?
The facts are correct, because
Yes.
we've seen this having been validated by the third party. There's no way that a report can be produced on the 28th, but the minutes are scored on the next day. It's a major anomaly from our perspective. For me, there needs to be an investigation firstly on that, which will now give me guidance that indeed fraud was committed. I don't have sufficient evidence to make that conclusion. The only conclusion I can make is that there's an irregularity here. It's a major cause of concern.
Did you instruct any investigation?
No, outside the BAC, I didn't.
Sorry, Mr. Mnisi, I find that very difficult to accept. Are you suggesting to me that when the BAC sees prima facie evidence of fraud and makes a decision on the basis of facts that prima facie indicate fraud, you can't instruct any investigation?
At this point in time, there's no prima facie evidence except for a finding. The finding that is raised is that as the probity team would pick this up, if there was prima facie evidence, the probity team would have raised it and made those attachments accordingly, which would have then empowered me or us as BAC to act on that accordingly.
You see,
Sir, I don't understand that answer. You are in the BAC, you have the probity report.
Yes.
It tells you these facts that are being put to you. That's what the probity report tells you, right?
Yes.
That the scoring happened a day after the recommendation was made. That's what they tell you.
Yes.
I don't understand why you have a difficulty with conceding or accepting that with those facts, if that's what happened, what the probity has established is a fact, which you accepted at the BAC as what has happened, that constitutes a fraud. That must be investigated. Not only because you're chairperson of the BAC, but also as CFO, you are responsible for the procurement, the integrity of your procurement processes. Why are you struggling to accept that it constitutes a fraud if it happened the way that probity has recorded it to have happened and that the BAC accepted to have happened?
Commissioner, I'm not struggling. Yes, the answer is yes. In the context of us sitting at BAC, we received finding number 1 on 406. It says the BEC score sheets are dated and signed on the 29th of May. However, there are no minutes to support the assumption that that there was a BEC meeting on the 29th of May.
Yes.
We accept that it raises alarms for us,
Yes.
and those alarms lead to a cancellation confined to the roles and responsibility of BAC. When we are discussing this matter now, of course I need to further have prima facie evidence to escalate the matter further, but I'm agreeing with you that when we are having more discussions and deliberating further in this matter, it does seem like it's constituting fraud.
Yes.
I'm just at a stage where I don't have prima facie evidence as a
do-
result of this finding to conclusive.
You do have prima facie evidence. You've got probity assurance, right?
Yes.
which is part of your system, so of your evaluation system, or even adjudication system. You have them. They've done the work. They've looked at the documents. They report that there is this irregularity, and they report it as a fact, irregularity. That's prima facie evidence that requires you to investigate, that requires an investigation, one. Two, that qualifies you to say it looks like fraud was committed here. We may need to investigate it further, but surely you have to easily be able to say, yes, it does look like, it does suggest a fraud. I'm battling with why are you struggling to accept the proposition that is being made to you, because it seems to be the a reasonable proposition being made to you that it suggests a fraud.
I agree with that.
Okay.
My answer is yes.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chaskalson.
Commissioner, if I can
Yes,
just
you
expand
may.
with
Yes,
your
you may.
permission, please. At the point of BAC conducting our work, this led to the cancellation. So we took that into account and we acted accordingly. Within our BAC, there are a variety of subject matter experts. Included in there is a legal expert as well who sits as part of our BAC. So I think in hindsight, the BAC should have made a recommendation of that nature. The basis of us cancelling that, Commissioner, was confined to the roles and responsibility of BAC, confined to procurement-related processes.
Thank you.
If we go to your BAC cancellation report, I've already indicated to you that it was noted that during the discussion of this matter by, if we go to 429, during the discussion of this matter by the bid adjudication meeting held on 23 October, the committee noted the following, that there were 6 documents lost during the relocation of documents to another storage. Therefore, measures and controls to safeguard documents should be implemented. So you were happy to indicate what should happen going forward in relation to document control, where there was, on your version, no evidence of fraud.
SC, documents that were missing are 6 documents. With your permission, I want to just expand further on that because I want to deal with if there's a confusion, that the 6 documents relate to score sheets, they relate to minutes.
No, we've clarified, they're bid documents.
Okay.
There are 6 bid documents that were lost, you say.
Yes.
And that means that your control systems are not working, and so you want the control systems to be improved and implemented. That's what you're saying there. Your committee is saying there. Is that not correct?
The answer is yes. That's what we're saying. Me expanding with your permission, SC, is that further to that, right, these are additional findings that were not noted in the probity report. So we escalate the additional 3 matters that are discussed and are picked up. So we raise them in isolation. Within additional findings that we are raising as the BAC, we propose additional measures to safeguard the procurement process, in particular reference to this bid. We have to, when we're looking at the minutes of each bidders, look at them in line of the unique nature of that program and what was happening on that particular bid. I wouldn't want us to interrelate that to all other bids within the city because the process this is not what happened in all other instances. So in this instance, the test of safeguarding documents was failed. So this finding was not raised. From probity, you can see that under the findings that were there. BAC picks this up. We then make a mitigation measure as well, which says you need to enhance and safeguard documents in the next process.
So when it comes to losing bid documents, there are mitigation measures that you're happy to put in place or to decree?
SC incorrect. We put mitigating measures everywhere. These mitigating measures were ones that were not identified. I'm trying to isolate the two, that we identified this as BAC. It wasn't part of the probity exercise that was there. Hence, we felt there's a duty for us, because we are picking this up, to put additional measures on board, over and above what we already seen from probity report, which has also made certain recommendations in summary. And amongst those recommendations that they had made, cure the process, etc.
But you didn't see fit to put in place mechanisms to investigate what appeared to be an out-and-out fraud in relation to this process, where a series of BEC members, on the facts that you accepted, made a recommendation the day before they purported to score the bidders.
You see, at that point in time, we confined ourselves to procurement-related matters. In hindsight, I'm agreeing that as a BAC, we should have considered that, and it's a matter that should have been raised. But at the point of adjudication, we performed our functions accordingly. We took into account the recommendations that were made by probity team. We put systems to try and cure all the findings. There were findings that were uncurable, which then led to the cancellation. But in hindsight, I agree with you, possible further steps should have been taken.
Can we look at what the BAC actually resolved on page 429? So there's a recordal of what the BEC discussed. During the discussion of this matter by the bid adjudication meeting held on 23 October, the committee noted the following. First bullet point, there were 6 documents lost during the relocation of documents to another storage. Therefore, measures and controls to safeguard documents should be implemented. We dealt with that. Second bullet point, the material irregularities identified by probity were due to the pricing schedule, which was issued as an addendum. In regard to the interpretations of the addendum, it stipulated that the pricing schedule must be completed in full, no blank statements, no blank spaces. Third bullet point, the BEC interpretation is that the pricing schedule need not to have blank spaces. According to probity report, which its recommendations have changed the initial BEC recommendation, states that blank spaces must be completed with numerical figures. This resulted in potential selective evaluation of bidders and the potential unjustified disqualified bidders. That the material irregularity due to the interpretations of the specifications, particularly the pricing schedule, remains an issue that could not be cured. Therefore, the committee agreed to the following recommendations. So we see nothing in that narrative of what was discussed as to whether the meeting was held on the 28th and the scoring was done on the 29th. That's just not mentioned.
I see the answer is yes. Commissioner would like to expand further. As I was reiterating during my explanation earlier on, matters that are raised in isolation within the BAC report are additional matters that the BAC wants to emphasize on, one, or that the BAC did not take note of within the probity report. So we don't ignore the findings that are already there in the probity report, but also we don't rehash or regurgitate those findings word for word because they've already been accepted. We only raise matters that were not there in the first place so that it can add to the potential, to the irregularities that are identified. And then we attach that probity report in full as an annexure with all other documents for the accounting officer's consideration.
We then see the actual resolution. And will you confirm that this is the resolution that the BAC adopted? It is resolved, it starts at 429, it goes through to 430. Is that the resolution that your committee adopted?
I accept it.
Do you see any references to the meeting of the 28th and the scoring on the 29th in that resolution? Anything that could possibly include, even by reference, that problem?
Standard practice, SC, we don't include that. This is a summary of the discussions and the resolution of cancelling. The discussions have already been held. The probity report has been considered. Additional matters on 49 have been identified. The resolution is now compliant to the Municipal Finance Management Act and the city's supply chain management policy on why we can cancel this tender. And it was a basis of point number D, where there was evidence of material irregularities. And those material irregularities had already been discussed. They've already been noted, not only in the probity assurance report, but further issues in the statement and discussion notes of the BAC. So by standard practice, we don't regurgitate all those matters again. We've got a number of other cancellations that I could bring to the commission. So you can see the standard practice of our cancellation resolutions at BAC.
But you did actually indicate your reasons for cancelling here. Let's look at the resolution. It says 1, TMPD 3 2024-25, tender for the appointment of a service provider to provide security services at various sites belonging to the city of Tshwane, including substations and reservoirs for a 3-year period, be cancelled due to material irregularity as indicated below. And then we see what is indicated below. During the evaluations of the tender, the committee identified the following misalignment and material irregularities. So, what is the difference between a misalignment and a material irregularity?
They're both material irregularities in this context. There was no coherence. So there was a misalignment.
So what do you refer to, when you refer to a misalignment, what do you mean?
It's an irregularity. There's no consensus.
No consensus?
There's no agreement. This matter couldn't be resolved.
Well, let's look at what you... So you're saying misalignment and material irregularities are the same thing?
In the context of our discussion here, that's what I'm saying, SC.
When you say consensus, whose consensus between what? The probity and the BEC?
Yes, yes.
Is that what your procurement policy, your supply chain management policy requires? I mean, I thought the BEC evaluates.
Yes.
And then probity looks at what was done and submits a report. It's not required to reach consensus with the BEC because it is not part of the bid evaluation committee. And then it submits a report, and then the matter comes to the BAC. So when you say there was no consensus between probity and BEC, on what basis? And you would have to point us to the policy, not just your opinion. On what basis do you say there has to be a consensus between the two?
Commissioner, maybe it's our discussion and how it's coming across in the commission. The point I'm trying to raise is that when a probity report has been prepared, finalized, signed off, before it's tabled to the BAC,